My name is Elena Hart, and I'm 41 years old. I was standing in my own kitchen, bathed in morning light, when I saw it, a yacht party clinking champagne flutes, and every face from my family smiling on screen. Except mine. At first, I thought I'd missed the invite. Maybe it was spam. Maybe someone forgot. But the silence wasn't new. Not after being erased from group chats, birthday dinners, family photos, not after putting my name on a deed that they now claimed as theirs. Then came the message not meant for me. Don't worry, she's not coming. I handled it. The mug in my hand didn't break. But something in me did. And when I boarded the yacht, I paid for the truth, followed me on deck. If you've ever been cut out of a story, you helped build this one's for you. Subscribe. Comment. I'm not staying quiet. The first thing I noticed that morning was how the sun spilled across the granite countertop, cutting the chill from the night before. The second thing was the crack in the handle of my favorite ceramic mug, the same crack I'd traced 100 times, refusing to replace it. I liked its imperfection. It felt honest. I cradled the mug between both hands, breathing in the sharp scent of black coffee. The kitchen was still and familiar. The low hum of the refrigerator, the soft thump of Miles' shoes by the back door. He'd already left for a client meeting as usual, leaving behind the faint scent of aftershave and a half-eaten banana browning near the sink. My phone sat beside me on the table. I picked it up more out of habit than curiosity, thumbing through unread emails, calendar pings, and stale group messages. It was supposed to be a slow morning. Nothing urgent, nothing loud. Then I saw it. A looping video clip posted by my niece Rachel, one of those boomerangs where the champagne flutes clink again and again in a celebratory loop. Behind them a yacht, sleek, white, familiar. The caption read, "Family tradition loading, can't wait to set sail." My thumb froze mid-scroll. It was the annual Hart family yacht trip. The same trip that once upon a time I had been invited to. The one I was told 2 years ago might be restructured. The same trip I'd attended twice, once right after I married Miles, and again the following year when I made the mistake of suggesting we rotate destinations so others could enjoy new scenery. I stared at the post longer than I meant to, watching the flutes clink on an endless loop. The faces in the video were easy to place. Claire, my sister-in-law, in oversized sunglasses. Her husband Jared, already tipsy, judging by the pink on his cheeks. My mother-in-law Adele, clutching a mimosa with both hands. Even Miles's younger cousin Julian was there with his fiancée, a woman I'd only met once. Everyone was there. Except me. I clicked through to another post, then another. A story reel from Jared's account showed the crew boarding. Luggage with gold-plated initials, personalized robes. My eyes scanned each frame, searching for some excuse, some oversight. There was a family group chat, one called Hart Legacy Voyagers. Miles had added me years ago, then quietly removed me after a spat about seating arrangements at Adele's birthday dinner. I checked it anyway. No messages, no notifications, no signs of life. I went to my email, typing Hart Yacht in the search bar. Nothing. Not even a stray message about itinerary planning or dietary restrictions. Not a mention, not a whisper. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a surgical omission. I sat very still. My coffee had cooled to the point of bitterness. I didn't bother to reheat it. There was no anger yet, just stillness, a sinking, quiet confirmation. This wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. A kind of static settled behind my eyes. Not the rage people expect when they imagine betrayal. This was something colder, like air leaving a room. I didn't know what to do at first, so I stood. I rinsed out my mug. I folded the dish towel on the counter. I opened the fridge and stared at the rows of glass containers inside, none of which looked appealing. I sat back down. It was only then I whispered aloud, "You weren't invited." And somehow hearing it outside my head made it real in a way the posts hadn't. I pulled up my calendar. Nothing. No invitation. No accidental deletion. Just the slow, deliberate removal of my presence like an outdated file. The thing about subtle exclusion is that it rarely announces itself. It creeps in through absence. It's the party you weren't asked to, the conversation that quiets when you walk in, the decisions made without your name ever needing to be spoken. I kept thinking about that looping boomerang, the toast, the smiles, the way Claire lifted her glass with that tight little grin she always wore when she was performing Family Unity for an audience. My name had been removed from the story, and what haunted me wasn't just the removal, it was how long I had convinced myself it might be accidental. How many times I had smiled through brunches where I wasn't included in plans. How many dinners I'd shown up to with a gift in hand, pretending I belonged. It wasn't the absence of an invite that broke me. It was the echo of all the times I'd told myself the silence meant nothing. The worst kind of erasure is the kind you almost help them perform. When you tell yourself you're imagining it. That maybe you were left out because of an honest oversight. That the email got stuck in spam. That the group chat must have restarted without you. I sat there in my kitchen in the sunlit quiet and realized I had given them every benefit of the doubt for years. And they had taken every inch of my silence and turned it into absence. I looked around my kitchen like it was foreign. Same granite counters, same creaky floorboard near the pantry, same fridge magnet from the time Miles and I went to Monterey and pretended we were still trying. The house hadn't changed, but I had. I picked up my phone again, opened Rachel's story once more. The champagne flutes clinked again and again like they were laughing at me. I muted the sound and closed the app. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd decide what to do next. But today I let myself sit with it. Not with rage, not yet. Just the weight of being left out of something I had helped build. Silently, thoroughly, on purpose. The text came just after 3 while I was rinsing out a water glass in the kitchen. The screen lit up with Claire's name, and for a second I almost smiled. I thought absurdly that maybe it was an apology, an after-the-fact invitation, a cleanup effort. But it wasn't meant for me. The message opened with a screenshot, grainy but legible, of a group text thread. A yacht cabin assignment list. Names neatly typed in a column beside room numbers. Under portside guest rooms, my name had been there once. Now it was crossed out. Bold and final. And next to it, written in a cheerful font, was a new name, Alana. Claire's yoga instructor. The one who once mistook me for Miles' assistant at a charity gala and never quite recovered from the awkwardness. The same Alana who regularly called Claire her soul sister during brunch posts, littered with smoothie bowls and inspirational quotes. Under the screenshot came a voice message. I pressed play without thinking, phone still damp from my fingertips. Claire's voice mid-laugh. At least the energy won't be so tight this year. That was it. Not cruel, not vicious, just casual. Confident, and devastatingly clear. The glass I'd been holding went back into the sink a little too hard. It clinked against the side, not quite breaking, but echoing louder than it should have. I stood there for a long time, my hands braced on the counter, staring into the dull silver of the drain. It was intentional. She hadn't just removed me, she'd replaced me. Subtly, efficiently. And she hadn't even bothered to double-check where she was sending the receipts. That night, dinner was salmon and roasted asparagus. Miles was distracted, flipping through stock alerts on his phone, between bites his fork clinking quietly against his plate. The room was dimly lit, our usual way of pretending ambiance was effort. I waited until halfway through the meal. Did you know your family's planning another yacht trip? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Miles glanced up. Yeah, I think Mom mentioned it. I'm not sure if everything's set. Still finalizing. I tilted my head slightly. Am I on the list? He frowned, put down his fork. Of course. Why wouldn't you be? I smiled just enough to keep things smooth. Just curious. He reached for his phone again. I'll double check. But yeah, you're on it. He wouldn't. I knew that. He'd let it drift like everything else. Miles had a gift for avoiding conflict by pretending it didn't exist. After dinner, I did the dishes by hand. Slowly, one by one. The warm water did nothing for the cold clarity sitting in my chest. Later, I sat on the couch, wrapping myself in the quiet. No television, no music. Just the soft tick of the mantel clock and the sound of Miles moving around in the study. My phone buzzed again. An email this time from the charter company that managed the yacht. Subject line cancellation. Confirmation. Cabin release processed. I stared at it for a few seconds before opening it. Inside the message was formal, emotionless. The kind written by someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. My assigned cabin 4A portside had been released at the request of Claire Hart. 3 days ago. No explanation. Just a date, a time, and a name. That was how she played it. Not directly, not emotionally, but systemically, methodically. I sat back and let the silence press in. It wasn't anger I felt. Not yet. It was recognition. This wasn't new. This was just the first time she'd been sloppy enough to leave the paper trail. I forwarded the email to myself, then printed a clean copy and walked it down the hallway to the study, opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder I used for old tax receipts and property documents. I slid the paper inside. Then I grabbed a sticky note and wrote in small, steady print, "Cabin. Claire. 3 days prior." I paused before sealing the folder shut. A phrase hovered in my mind, not loud, but weighted. This wasn't about a room. It was about a pattern. The kind I'd tolerated for too long. The kind that made you question your own memory. That insidious rhythm of being almost included, almost welcomed, always on the outside edge of belonging. I labeled the folder neatly, personal, property and legal, just for now. But I already knew it would get a new label soon. One that felt more honest. One that told the truth no one else wanted to say. The next evening, I found myself at the dining room table, long after the last light had faded from the sky. The house was quiet. Miles had retreated to his side of the silence, some late call maybe, or just his usual disappearing act into the glow of a screen. I didn't ask. Instead, I opened my laptop and started a new document. No formatting, no preamble, just a blinking cursor and a title at the top in bold things. Claire did that I let slide. I stared at it for a while, letting the words settle. Then I started typing, forgot to include me in Rachel's bridal shower email chain. Twice. Tagged the wrong Elena Hart in a family post and left it up for 3 days. Scheduled brunch the day after telling me they were taking a break from group gatherings. Said, "You're so good at listening," anytime I offered an idea, then repeated it as her own 2 weeks later. Called me supportive when I was the one paying the invoices. Took credit for the charity auction I coordinated, then thanked me for volunteering. The list grew quickly. My fingers didn't hesitate. Each entry came back with an edge sharp not because of the acts themselves, but because of how long I had swallowed them without protest. I wasn't surprised by the quantity. I was surprised by the ease. My body remembered more than I thought. I paused and closed my eyes, letting the next one come naturally. There it was. A brunch last year, Claire's favorite kind, curated within an inch of its life. Cloth napkins, handwritten menus, custom place cards she always printed herself, even though I'd offered to help. I remember the white tablecloth fluttering in the wind and the way the light hit the crystal glasses, just so everything shimmering like it had been filtered through gold. She stood to toast glass raised with that polished warmth she'd perfected over years of manipulating attention. "This yacht," she said, "isn't just a boat. It's a symbol of what our family has built together, of our legacy, our unity." Everyone smiled and nodded, lifted their glasses. No one glanced at me. No one remembered or chose to forget that I had purchased the yacht outright 5 years ago when my startup had finally turned profit after years of bleeding out capital and patience. I didn't interrupt her toast. I'd just smiled, held my glass, and sipped a drink I no longer tasted. The truth was, I had built more than the yacht. I'd built the life Miles and I lived, the house we entertained in, the vacations we funded. I was the one who kept our world intact while Claire painted herself into its center. That yacht had been my first real purchase, not out of comfort but triumph. After years of wearing second-hand suits to pitch meetings and hearing men tell me I was too cautious or not aggressive enough. After walking into rooms where my ideas were politely dismissed until someone with louder vocal cords and a Y chromosome repeated them and got funding. I'd done it anyway. I remembered the moment I signed the check. There wasn't a quiver in my hand. I didn't call anyone, didn't post about it. I just walked out of the office and sat in my car with the receipt folded in my coat pocket, staring at the dash as if it might blink back in recognition. I'd done it. But when it came time to finalize the paperwork, our accountant had advised something more strategic. Just put it in both your names, he'd said. Cleaner for estate planning, easier to manage down the road. I hadn't thought twice. I'd added Miles's name to the yacht. He hadn't asked for it. He hadn't insisted. He hadn't even thanked me, really. Just nodded like it made sense. And maybe it did on paper. But that decision, the one I thought was purely logistical, had opened a door I didn't realize others would walk through without knocking. The moment Miles's name appeared alongside mine, the story shifted. The yacht became part of the family's legacy. Not my risk, not my sacrifice, just another convenient piece of a curated image. Claire made sure of that. She had a gift for repackaging reality into narratives that made her look central. She'd built a platform on lifestyle and loyalty, her Instagram full of sun-soaked captions and choreographed affection. And I had played along. Because it was easier. Because I thought if I kept smiling through the discomfort, eventually they'd see me clearly. But that's the thing about polite exclusion. It doesn't scream. It erodes. I scrolled to the bottom of my list and typed one last line. Some wounds don't bleed. They erase. I sat there staring at those words, the cursor blinking after them like it was waiting for permission to move on. But I didn't. I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms, and let the silence settle around me. Not the kind Claire dealt in the smiling silence, the soft dismissals wrapped in pleasantries. This silence was different. It was mine. The message came in mid-morning, wrapped in the beige blandness of corporate courtesy. From someone named Stephanie, Claire's assistant. She'd emailed me once before about catering options for Adele's birthday. Polite, efficient, painless. But this time, she'd sent the wrong thing to the wrong recipient. The email subject read, RE finalized roster, Legacy Voyagers. I clicked it without thinking, expecting a stray calendar attachment or a follow-up from a past event. Instead, what stared back at me was a screenshot of another group thread. This one wasn't even disguised. Names, rooms, an itinerary header that read, Yacht Trip Manifest, Final. No Elena Hart, not even in the margins. Then, just beneath the image, a one-line message, simple, chilling in its certainty. Don't worry, she's not coming. I handled it. Claire's words. I sat back, blinking not from tears, but from the pressure behind my eyes, the kind that builds when clarity arrives without warning. It wasn't speculation now. It wasn't assumption or paranoia or bad communication. She had removed me, confirmed it, and bragged about the cleanup. I didn't reply. Didn't forward the email. I simply printed it. One crisp page, no margin notes, no highlights, just proof. I added it to the manila folder, which now had a new label, Truth. Do not discard. Then I stood, not with urgency, not with drama, just calm, practiced movements. I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a small black suitcase, the kind with 4 wheels and a smooth glide. I hadn't used it since last year's leadership retreat. I didn't pack bathing suits or sandals. I didn't need sun hats or cocktail dresses. I packed documents, receipts, legal printouts, my original wire transfer to the yacht company, The signed purchase agreement with my name listed first, the cancellation email, the handled it message. Everything Claire thought I wouldn't keep. Everything Miles had let slide. From the bottom drawer of my dresser, I retrieved a navy dress tailored classic, not loud. Neutral armor. I folded it carefully and placed it on top. Then I zipped the suitcase shut. The click of the zipper sounded final in the quiet room. I was in the kitchen later pouring a second cup of coffee when Miles walked in, still dressed in his running clothes, sweat darkening his collar. "Hey," he said, eyeing the suitcase in the corner. "You going somewhere, Newport?" I said simply, not looking up. His brow furrowed. Now I took a slow sip before answering. "Yes. Tomorrow morning." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're really doing this?" "I am." He paused, searching for the right tone. "Look, I get that you're upset, but do we have to escalate it like this?" I turned toward him, mug in hand. Steady voice. "It's not escalation, Miles. It's response." He exhaled, rubbing his temple. "I just don't want this to become something bigger than it needs to be. Claire. She probably didn't mean anything by it." I set the mug down. "She canceled my reservation, then bragged about it." His mouth opened, but no words followed. "She handled it," I added. Those were her words. He swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. "Maybe she thought we weren't going. Did you think that?" He didn't answer. That was answer enough. The silence stretched between us like thread pulling tight. Finally, I reached for my phone and opened the group chat, Heart Legacy Voyagers. I hadn't typed anything there in months. Probably hadn't been expected to. But now I wrote, "I'll see you in Newport. I trust there's room." I hit send. No emojis, no qualifiers, no warmth. It wasn't a plea for space. It was a notice. Miles stepped closer. "Elena." I shook my head. "If you want to stay, stay. But don't ask me to pretend this didn't happen." He looked down, then back at me, his voice low. "You're not the only one this affects." "No," I said softer now. "But I'm the only one who's paid for it." I walked past him, my hand brushing the suitcase handle, the wheels clicking softly as I moved it beside the door. The hallway light caught the glint of the zipper. Clean. Closed. It felt good not to explain, not to beg, just to declare. That night I didn't review old texts. I didn't scroll through memories looking for proof of belonging. I opened my folder and touched each document like it was a page in a book only I had been reading. There was no fear left in my body, only quiet, only readiness. The marina was still wrapped in a fine, salt-washed haze when I stepped out of the car. Newport always carried the scent of old money and new intentions, sails rustling against masts, polished wood decks gleaming under a filtered sun. It was early. I wanted it that way. No need for a dramatic entrance. I didn't come for spectacle. I came for clarity. I wore a black sheath dress, simple tailored, a soft tan coat draped over my shoulders light enough to move with the breeze. No jewelry beyond my wedding band. Flats, not heels. Everything about me was quiet, intentionally so. There was no need to dress for attention when the truth did the speaking for you. My suitcase wheeled silently behind me as I walked down the dock, no wobble, no rush. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured. And then I saw her. Claire stood near the boarding gate mid-conversation with a man I didn't recognize, one of Julian's friends maybe, or a distant cousin trying to curry favor. She was in her element, of course. Chin-high voice, light hair, pinned with surgical precision. A champagne flute balanced effortlessly in her left hand. She looked up, and she saw me. Her face didn't contort. It just stopped moving, frozen mid-expression like a photograph that didn't know it had been taken. Her smile stalled, her eyes narrowed by half a degree. That's all it took. Claire was not a woman easily shocked. But this wasn't surprise. This was inconvenience. The man beside her turned to follow her gaze. His eyebrows lifted slightly, then dropped again, unsure how to respond to whatever current he'd just stepped into. The others noticed quickly. Adele's head turned. Jared whispered something behind a palm. A few cousins shifted not with hostility, but with that subtle choreography the Hart family had perfected, bodies tilting just enough to form a barrier, a social buffer dressed in politeness. I didn't slow. The lead crew member, a tall woman in a navy blazer, stepped forward with practiced grace. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Hart," she said clearly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Owner clearance confirmed." Behind me, a few heads turned. A napkin slipped from someone's hand. I didn't glance back. I nodded once to the woman, handed over my boarding credentials, and stepped onto the yacht. My heels tapped twice against the polished teak. I paused at the edge of the deck, letting the weight of the moment catch up to my breath. Then, I walked forward, past the deck chairs, past the floral centerpieces Claire had likely agonized over, past the seating charts that would no doubt place me far from the center of anything. I didn't look for Miles. I knew he was there. He always circled the edges of conflict like a man waiting to see which way the wind would blow. I found an empty chair at the rear lounge, not at the main table, not with the group, just a quiet spot in the shade, and I sat. Lunch was served not long after. Lobster rolls, endive salad, sparkling wine and tall flutes. I didn't eat, I didn't speak, I didn't need to. They were watching me now, trying to figure out the angle, waiting for me to flinch, but I didn't come to prove a point. I came to hold one. Across the deck, Claire adjusted a floral arrangement, then her phone, then her smile. She turned her camera on and lifted her voice just enough to reach whoever followed her online. "We're so excited to share a little slice of our family tradition today," she began, beaming. "There's nothing like the open water to remind you who you are and where you come from. Family is everything. Legacy, loyalty, love." I almost laughed. Not out loud, just that quiet inward laugh that doesn't need an audience. She kept going, a practiced melody of curated sincerity. "The people who are here," she continued, "well, they understand what it means to build something that lasts. Not just wealth, but memory. Commitment." Right on cue, a crew member walked behind her, one who clearly didn't realize or didn't care that a live stream was underway. He passed by with a clipboard in hand and said with calm clarity, "Glad to have you back. Ms. Hart, the owner." Claire didn't turn, but her mouth faltered for a fraction of a second. The smile wavered like a curtain snagging on a nail. The phone dipped. The comments began rolling in almost immediately. "Wait, she's the owner. Did she say family legacy? Someone check that tea. It's piping." Claire tapped at the screen, fumbled for the stop button. Her face stayed polished, but her eyes, those betrayed her. Not panic. Worse. Recognition. The story she'd spent years controlling had slipped out of her hands in 3 seconds of unscripted reality. And I hadn't said a word. I sipped water from a crystal glass and crossed one leg over the other. No performance. No smirk. Just presence. Let her scramble. Let her followers wonder. Let the silence do the talking. The dining room glowed with curated elegance. Claire had spared no detail. Eucalyptus runners lined the table, gold-rimmed plates shimmered under the soft light of hanging lanterns, and every glass sparkled like it had been polished with intention. Conversation flowed around me like background music, carefully timed, well-rehearsed. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I watched Claire move through the evening like she was hosting a gala, not a family dinner. She laughed too loudly at her own stories, adjusted napkins that didn't need adjusting, poured wine with a flourish. She made a point not to look at me, but her awareness of my presence buzzed just under the surface of every sentence she spoke. Miles sat across the table, quiet. He avoided my gaze, choosing instead to swirl his drink in slow circles, his mouth tight, his shoulders a little too square. He hadn't said much all day, not since the crew welcomed me aboard with full owner clearance. Not since Claire's live stream had tripped over an inconvenient truth. Dessert arrived in perfect portions. Vanilla bean panna cotta with citrus zest. It was delicate, refined, just like Claire liked everything to appear. I didn't touch mine. I sat with my back straight and my hands folded in my lap, the leather folder at my side. Claire stood lifting her champagne flute with both hands, her voice warm and practiced. I just want to take a moment. She began to thank everyone for being here tonight. This trip has always been about more than sun and sea. It's about us, our legacy. The people who understand what it means to carry that legacy with grace. She paused. Her gaze swept the table like a spotlight, never quite landing on me but orbiting just close enough to be deliberate. It's not about who shows up, once she continued, but about who continues to show up with the right energy. Who builds, who uplifts, who honors tradition. Soft murmurs of agreement floated around the table. A few glasses clinked. I waited. Not out of nerves, out of timing. When the last spoon scraped the bottom of the panna cotta dish and the conversation hit that natural lull, the one just before someone suggests a game or another toast, I stood. I'd like to add something. The sentence cut through the room with the clarity of a chime. Claire froze. Her glass still lifted her face somewhere between surprise and apprehension. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached into the leather folder beside me and pulled out a sheet of paper, clean white, printed on legal letterhead. I laid it flat in the center of the table beside the wine carafe. This, I said calmly, is a transcript from a call held last month between Claire and the family's legal consultant. Several heads turned. Some leaned in. My finger tapped a line highlighted in soft yellow. She's not blood, I read aloud. She shouldn't own a family asset. No one moved. Claire's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I reached for the second page. This, I continued, is the purchase agreement for the yacht. Initial down payment made by me, Elena Hart, sole investor, legal co-owner listed first. Miles shifted in his seat. I didn't know she said that, he stammered. Claire, why would you... Claire finally found her voice. I was protecting the family, she said, her tone brittle. I didn't think it would matter. You thought I'd stay quiet, I said softly. And you were almost right. Adele cleared her throat. Jared looked down at his plate. Someone across the table muttered, "Wow," under their breath. I didn't raise my chin. I didn't let the heat rise. I'm not bringing this up for drama, I said. I'm bringing it up because I'm done being spoken about in closed rooms like I'm not in the next one. The air shifted. It wasn't explosive. It was seismic. A movement you feel more than hear. Miles glanced at me, then at Claire. You really tried to cut her out. Claire looked around for support, but no one offered a lifeline. Not this time. I thought it would keep things cleaner, she whispered. No, I replied. You thought it would keep things yours. Someone stood from the far end of the table. It was Harriet Miles's cousin, quiet, always watching. I think we've all been told different versions of the story, she said. Maybe it's time we ask who's been keeping the record. I nodded. This isn't revenge, I said, tapping the folder once more. It's record-keeping. After dessert, no one suggested another toast. Claire left first. No announcement, no apology. Just a stiff nod, and the sound of her heels retreating down the teak hallway. Her wineglass remained half-full lip print, fading in the candlelight. No one followed. The conversation resumed in patches, cautious and off-kilter, like everyone was trying to remember how to speak without Claire orchestrating the rhythm. Laughter was too quick. Small talk came with nervous glances. I didn't stay long. As the others gathered around the makeshift bar or leaned into wine-softened conversations, I slipped out to the lower deck. The air had cooled the salt in the breeze, brushing against my skin like something ancient indifferent. I kicked off my shoes and walked barefoot across the deck. The teak was smooth and cold beneath my feet, grounding in a way nothing else had been for a long time. The world was quiet here. No performances, no reshuffling chairs. Just the gentle lap of the sea and the faint murmur of music drifting from above. A shadow appeared at my side. It was Julian's wife, Anna, quiet, always kind, rarely included in the power plays. I always wondered, she said, voice barely above a whisper, why you weren't more visible. I mean, we all knew you built the company, the yacht. But somehow... She let the sentence trail off like she didn't trust herself to say it fully. I nodded. I know. She squeezed my hand once and disappeared back inside. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps. Slower. Familiar. Adele. She approached with the kind of care reserved for delicate moments. The matriarch, who had always seemed untouchable in pearls and quiet judgments. Now she stood before me, smaller, somehow. Less certain. I didn't see it before she said. Her voice was low, almost brittle. Now I do. She didn't offer an apology, just a sentence and space, and that was enough. She walked away without waiting for a response. For once, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence she left behind. Later, back in our cabin, Miles stood at the dresser, folding a shirt he hadn't worn. The gesture struck me as absurd, clinging to order when everything around us had shifted. I think I always knew, he said after a long silence. His voice cracked not from emotion, but from trying too hard to sound composed. Not everything, but enough. I didn't interrupt. I should have defended you. Every time Claire made one of her digs. Every time she left you out. I told myself if I kept the peace long enough it would work itself out. He looked at me, then eyes tired, jaw tense. I didn't lose my voice, he said. I gave it away. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting in my lap. The folder was still there beside me, unopened, no longer necessary. I know, I said quietly. He stepped closer. If you want, I'll talk to Ronald. We can restructure the ownership. Take my name off completely. Make it yours officially. It should have been from the beginning. I looked up at him. Really looked. This was never about papers, I said. It was about presence. He nodded. Didn't press. We stood in that shared understanding, not forgiveness, not yet, but something truer. Recognition. Respect. Maybe even the start of repair. That night, I didn't unpack the folder again. I didn't reread the transcripts or rewatch the speech. Instead, I opened the sliding door to the deck and stepped outside. Barefoot, once more the sea wind pressing against me like a reminder you were never the one who needed to be louder. Just the one who needed to be seen. The house welcomed me with stillness. Not the kind that used to press down on my shoulders after awkward family dinners or tense car rides home. This was different. This silence was clean, like a room finally aired out after years of stale air. Nothing had moved in my absence. The creaky floorboard near the pantry still groaned as I stepped inside. The grocery list on the fridge was exactly where I'd left it. Miles's coat hung on the hook by the door untouched. I stood in the entryway for a long moment, suitcase in hand, just letting the quiet settle. It didn't feel empty. It felt honest. No messages waited on my phone. No voicemails from Claire trying to salvage face. No apologies drafted by cousins. No calls from Adele pretending none of it happened. They weren't going to explain themselves. They weren't going to offer closure. And that was fine. I hadn't gone to the yacht to be invited back into the fold. I'd gone to burn the blueprint they thought I'd follow forever. I carried my suitcase upstairs and unpacked slowly. Not just clothes, but pieces of the truth I'd carried home with me, memories, realizations, the final exhale of a performance I no longer had to give. Then I opened the folder. The one with transcripts receipts, cancellation notices. It felt heavier than it had before, like the weight had finally shifted from my chest to the paper itself. I didn't reread anything. I didn't need to. The story was clear now. I slid each page back into its sleeve, pressed the folder closed, and filed it away in the back of the cabinet, not out of reach, but out of sight. It had served its purpose. As I reached for a stack of old envelopes shoved behind some photo albums, something fell out. A folded scrap of stationery, the edges worn and soft. My name was written across the front in my father's careful block letters. I had no memory of receiving it. Maybe it was slipped into a book. Maybe it came in a birthday card or was handed off during one of those family weekends when I was too tired to decode subtle dismissals. I unfolded it and read the single line inside, "Don't fight for a seat. Build your own table." I ran my thumb over the ink like it might smear after all these years. It didn't. That night I made tea and sat by the window, the note resting on the table beside me. I watched the streetlights flicker on one by one and felt something I hadn't in years. Not triumph, not relief. Peace. A few days passed quietly. I returned to my routine emails, vendor calls, late-night journaling. I wore slippers and soft sweaters. I lit candles without occasion. Then one morning my phone rang. I almost didn't recognize the name Sabrina Hart. Claire's niece, 23, reserved, the kind of girl who always seemed to be observing from the edges, never quite joining the circle, but never entirely outside of it. "Hi, Elena," she said, tentative but clear. "I hope this isn't crossing a line." I waited, curious. "I've been thinking about the trip, about what happened, about you." Her voice trembled, but only slightly. "You're the only one in the family who built something on your own. Not married into, not inherited. Built. And I want to do that too. I'm applying for this mentorship program. Would you look at my application?" There was a pause, the kind that held both fear and hope. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. "Yes," I said. "Send it over." She exhaled and the line filled with warmth. We talked for a few minutes more. Nothing heavy, just enough to mark the beginning of something neither of us had words for yet. When I hung up, I looked again at my father's note. He was right. The seat wasn't the prize. The table was. The one you shape with your own hands. The one you fill with people who don't ask you to shrink but make room when you arrive. I picked up the note and tucked it inside the drawer of my desk, not filed away but close enough to touch. Legacy. I realized isn't something you inherit. It's something you build. And maybe, if you do it right, someone younger and quieter than you ever were might see it and decide to build their own. Sunday arrived with soft light and the smell of coffee already warming in the kitchen. I moved through the morning unhurried, setting out mismatched plates, slicing strawberries, fluffing the cushions on the bench by the window. I didn't write a menu. I didn't arrange flowers. There were no place cards, no linen napkins, no centerpieces designed to impress. This wasn't that kind of brunch. I had invited only 5 people, not out of exclusivity, but clarity. These were the people who had shown up in small, quiet ways when it mattered. No last names required, no obligatory family connections, just presence. Callista arrived first, wearing jeans and a messy bun, holding a tray of lemon bars that she admitted were store-bought but selected with care. She dropped her bag by the front door and walked straight into the kitchen, like she'd always lived here. "You look different," she said, eyeing me over her mug as we poured coffee. "Not newer, just lighter." I smiled. "Feels that way." Ronald and his wife Elise followed soon after. They brought a bottle of wine and a bag of fresh oranges from their tree out back. He wore his usual linen blazer, creased at the elbows, familiar. "You didn't have to dress up," I teased. He grinned. "I didn't. This is just my brunch uniform." Sabrina came last, a little hesitant, holding a folder clutched to her chest like it was both a shield and a gift. "I brought my application," she said, stepping through the door. "I mean, if that's okay." I took the folder gently and set it on the side table. "We'll look at it together later. Today's for brunch." We gathered around my table, long and wooden, slightly uneven in the legs. I'd found it years ago in a salvage yard, sanded it down myself, stained it over a long weekend, when I still believed that quiet labor could fix anything. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was mine. We ate eggs and toast. Callista told a story about a disastrous book signing. Elise shared a memory of her first apartment where the oven had exploded mid-Thanksgiving. Sabrina, shy at first, eventually leaned in and laughed like someone realizing she'd been holding her breath for years. No one raised a glass for a speech. No one took a photo for social media. No one documented anything except in memory. We just talked. And somewhere between the third refill of coffee and the last lemon bar, I realized I wasn't looking for anything anymore. Not from Claire, not from Adele, not even from Miles. I no longer needed a text message that never came, or an apology wrapped in caveats, or a family photo where I was finally centered. I wasn't chasing inclusion like it was a reward for good behavior, because I had something better now, a table I built, a space that didn't require me to shrink or contort or prove myself over and over again just to earn a seat. Here, I didn't have to explain how I got here. Everyone already knew. After everyone left, the house was quiet again, but not the heavy kind. It was the kind of quiet that follows warmth. I cleared the dishes slowly, placing each one in the sink like it mattered. I wiped down the table, letting my hand rest briefly on the wood I'd once sanded with aching arms and stubborn hope. Then I sat down alone with my coffee and stared out the window. The backyard looked a little wild, the rosemary bush overgrown. I liked it that way. I thought about everything I used to long for: acceptance, apology, belonging, and how none of it had ever been about the people who withheld it. It had always been about the girl I used to be, the one who waited on the edges of rooms for someone to pull out a chair and say, "You matter." She had no idea that one day she'd stop asking, that one day she'd carve her own seat out of wood and grit and silence, that one day she'd be the one offering chairs to people who saw her not as an accessory, but as the architect. I looked down at the surface of the table, saw the faint scratch where I'd once dropped a serving spoon too hard. I'd never sanded it out. I liked that too. Some peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from no longer needing it.